Looks like this thing is working. What's happening, everybody? Hope everybody's having a fantastic Saturday. Chances are your Saturday did not quite go as well as you had hoped if you're watching this on a Saturday. Give a few folks a chance to pop in, and then we're going to get started on the topic. Been working on Little Miss Sierra, which is kind of going well. Got a few things that need attention, but it's getting there. So that's the main thing. I will tell you that she is running good, at least if nothing else. Demonology, what's happening, my brother? Tuxedo is in, Slash is in. So let's talk a little bit about hybrids, hybrid technology. I think, first of all, there's a lot of misconceptions about what is and what isn't a hybrid. And so you need to understand the concept of hybrid before we can really even have a conversation about the topic. So whether it's a good thing, it's a bad thing, you like hybrids, you don't like hybrids, it doesn't really matter. Let's talk about what they're going to mean for the future. And that's really kind of the key direction of the conversation. Now, you know me, I'm going to go off a little bit here and there, but the reality is that, well, it looks like that's going to be the way that this is going. So what are hybrids? Well, all hybrid in this terminology, all it's referring to is a gasoline engine, or I should say an internal combustion engine of some kind, coupled with somehow an electric power plant to get an automobile moving. Well, what are the different types of hybrid technologies? Well, you'd be surprised to learn that there's actually quite a few different hybrids out there. You can't just say hybrid and have that mean the same thing to everybody. So let me walk y'all through the different types of hybrids first, and then we can get into how they can be implemented in terms of production cars, performance, things like that. So the first type of hybrid, dang, hang on a second. Demonology, my man, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Well, we're going to get into it here in just a minute. So, man, I really do appreciate the contribution to the cause. And so I'm going to get into the different types of hybrid technology. Some are more invasive, if you will, and others are a bit more passive, if you want to think of them that way. So first, the first type of hybrid is going to be something known as a mild hybrid. Now, this is as rudimentary of a hybrid system as you can get. And basically it works like the e-torque system in the Dodge trucks. There were also some, well, at least a commercially offered type of a product like this by the aftermarket. It was primarily for LS platforms. And basically what it is if you took an alternator and allowed it to not only be an alternator, but an electric motor. And what that contraption does is, through basically a 10 or a 12 rib belt setup on your serpentine drive system, basically your front engine accessory drive, on demand, when you command extra power, that alternator will switch from being an alternator, which is feeding batteries, to an electric motor, because there's no real difference in terms of internal structure between the two. It'll go from a alternator to an electric motor. Now, keep in mind that this is now working within a 48 volt system. There are step down capacitors and all other kind of electronic abracadabras to make everything work with a 12 volt system. But just understand this. The contraption itself, which is about as big as a rugby ball, is going to generate around 90 foot-pounds of torque. The actual horsepower number is probably, if you wanted to call it, somewhere in the range of about 40 odd horsepower. Here's the thing though, it's not a long-term sustainable, repeatable acceleration. The reason for that is that that type of a system is meant only to aid in getting the vehicle moving to aid with stop-start technology. It's there to help, but it is absolutely not able to run on electricity alone. In fact, the entire apparatus weighs just the other side of 100 pounds. Call it 125 pounds. For a 30 to 45 pound battery pack, the extra big alternator contraption, the extra wiring, and everything else that goes into play. The thing is, with that type of a system, because there's no ability to run the vehicle under electric-only conditions, there's no range extension for the vehicle. And yeah, there's a little bit more torque, a little bit more power, but it's a little bit, and it's in very short bursts. And I've heard a lot of things about the e-torque system. Some guys like it. They say they notice a little bit of a difference, but that needs to be the key term, or at least the key mentality. It's a little bit of a difference, but it's not a big difference. I went searching and searching and searching and searching, trying to find where an e-torque, equipped truck, where that e-torque equipped truck was put up against a normal version of that particular truck. What was the acceleration difference? I couldn't find it. I know that towing capacity had gone up, but as you can see, that kind of plays into how that system works. You get this shove, and then that's about all there is to it. You get a little bit of a push and nothing else. So again, mild hybrid technology. Now, we are admittedly kind of in the early stages of this. And of course, you could ramp up battery capacity, and you could beef up the motor, have two motors, if you will, run off of that front engine accessory drive. But there's just no way, number one, to run the engine by itself, run the car itself without the engine running on battery power, because obviously it's turning the front engine accessory drive. And the amount of power that you can get out of something like that is going to be limited. Again, yes, it's great for short bursts in terms of towing, moving the vehicle, just kind of giving it a whoosh. And then maybe on a shift where you activate the motor for just a couple of seconds on a 3, 4, 4, 5 shift, just to give a little bit better of a push. But that's about the best you can hope for out of those types of systems. Bottom line, it's still basically an internal combustion engine with a little bit of love from the electricity pixies, okay? So that is going to be known as, by the way, parallel and in series type of hybrid systems. But the example that I just gave you is still considered a parallel system. It is not a system in series. The only difference in all of that, just to get away from some of the jargon that you'll get caught up in with this, is that a hybrid system that is in series uses only electric motors to motivate the vehicle. However, there is an internal combustion engine there to turn a generator to charge batteries to power the vehicle. If the batteries are very low, that generator can then give current to the electric motors. Think of that like a locomotive, a ship, something like that. That is a system that is in series. Anything that uses the transmission or the engine or anything else, that is going to be in parallel. You can think of both of them working together to get the vehicle going in terms of actual mechanical force to the wheels, the drive wheels themselves. So all of that out of the way, I wanted to address the e-torque thing first, because it's a mild hybrid, and that's really not the idea. When people think hybrid, that's really not what they're talking about. As if you notice, the trucks themselves don't even have the badging of hybrid on them. It just says e-torque, and it's like that for a reason. So, parallel hybrids, how do they work? Well, there's a lot of different ways you can do this, but the way that Dodge is planning on doing this is a parallel hybrid system. Quite honestly, much the same way that the Prius is used theirs, where you have an electric motor between the engine and the transmission, and that electric motor provides acceleration. It can help in braking. It is a much more substantial motor, not only because of the size of the thing, but just for what the intended purposes are for that particular type of system. You guys are familiar with the normal type of hybrid that we're talking about now. This is the most familiar type that you probably would be used to. In that case, you've got a certain amount of limited range that you can drive on electric power only, but that electricity is, well, kind of going to be a limiting factor. 15 to 45, 50 miles is going to be the absolute cap that you could hope for. But let's see how that system would work for Dodge. Right now, what they're talking about is they're talking about basically introducing a system that would give somewhere in the neighborhood of, say, 125 horsepower and 225 pound-feet of torque through this hybridized system. So, for any of you guys that think, wow, man, an extra 125 horsepower, an extra 200 pound-feet of torque, that sounds amazing. Well, it kind of is. So let's run the numbers back real quick. If you've got a 5.7 and you add this type of system to that vehicle, you go from about 400 horsepower, because that's really what they're making, to about 525 horsepower, or basically just the other side of what a 392 is currently making. Obviously, torque would go from 400 pound-feet to 600 pound-feet, and I can really just use 100 and 200 just for the sake of argument here, because that's about how this thing's going to shake loose. Your 6.4 would then go from basically 500 horsepower to 600 horsepower and 400 and almost 500 foot-pounds of torque to just under, say, let's call it 650, just to be safe in terms of torque. In other words, it starts to sound a lot like a Hellcat. Hellcat would, if it would even be possible to do this type of a system with a Hellcat, would obviously go down the list here. You know, 707 goes, or 700 and whatever goes to 800 and whatever, you got 800 pound-feet of torque. The way that the thing breaks loose is 100 horsepower, probably a little bit more, a couple of 100 foot-pounds of torque, but is it a good thing? See, this is where you really start to have to use your noodle a little bit. You've already come into this conversation knowing how traction limited these Mopars are. And with the fact that these electric hybrid systems offer immediate torque response, that's kind of a silly thing when you start to think of a Demon, a Redline, a Super Stock, a Hellcat, a 392, and even the 5.7. It's a little bit silly to think of it as, wow, we get all this extra torque. What are you going to do with it? You're already lighting tires up all the way down city blocks as it is with the torque and the power that you got. It's not going to make that any easier. And if you dumb that down to get the car to launch, well, I got news for you. You've lost everything that makes an electric motor awesome, which is the fact that it works best under high amp draw conditions or at 0 RPM full throttle. That's when they are making their most power. And so I look at that and I go, man, you know, it's a little bit difficult for me to get on board with all of that. All this extra power and everything does seem to, on paper at least, looks real attractive. Could you imagine throwing a set of ET Street Rs, a set of DBRs from Hoosier onto your 6.4 equipped, electronically enhanced, your E-roids, scat pack, and go out there and run in the tens fairly easily with that type of a setup? That would be pretty cool. I'm just curious as to what do you do if you got a Hellcat, Redline? You're already not able to hook, and now you're going to have a car that absolutely won't be able to hook unless you're at a drag strip. So anyway, it's kind of funny to me, just kind of going through the whole mental exercise. And we keep hearing about how hybridization is the wave of the future, and this is how things are going to be. But the only way that it makes sense is if you start to eliminate the higher tier engine combinations, or you exclude those higher tier engine combinations in favor of a hybrid 5.7 or in favor of a hybrid 6.4. Now, obviously, that basically excludes any idea of ever having a 426 anything going into a Mopar. I mean, you're not going to get 100 foot or 200 foot-pounds of torque and 100 horsepower out of bumping up the displacement of a 392 by, I don't know, 30 cubic inches, basically. It ain't going to get there from here, guys. So, for those that look at this as a bad thing, what you got to think of is this. At least they're trying, and they're going to keep the muscle car DNA intact. Gary Fuller, thank you very much, saying, what up, B? Got the arm flexing, saying, thanks for all your expert knowledge. Man, thank you for hanging out, brother. But what this would allow folks to do is if you've got an idea in your head for the ultimate muscle car, and the idea that you have in your head is torque, well, brother, have I got a car for you. That 392 would be sick with whatever they're going to call it, hell torque or E-Venom. I don't know. Just start coming up with goofy ideas that would make perfectly good sense. It's Mopar after all. But yeah, I mean the car would, if you took the current setup, 392, 485 horse, now you're at 585 horse. No, it's not a Hellcat horsepower number, but you take 475 torque and now it's 675 torque. That starts to look pretty good. So, but interesting again, how you're still not there yet. You're still not at that Hellcat number yet. Even by throwing an extra 100 horsepower and 200 foot-pounds of torque at that engine, you're just barely getting into the league of Hellcat. So let's talk about cost now, because getting into the league of Hellcat has been a big reason why a lot of 392 owners have sold their 392s and bought a Hellcat, because all this extra money that you would throw into your 392 would only put you just a little bit less farther behind the Hellcat than what you would have been if you'd have just left the car stock. That's just the cold truth. Now we're talking about taking a $40,000, $45,000, I should say, car, and what would be the cost incurred on something like one of these hybrid systems? Well, you go back through the history books, typically you're looking at about $10,000 to $12,000 to get that hybrid technology. Now, there may be some economies of scale here that could start to take place, but would you agree that $10,000 would be probably pretty close to the number? I mean, I would guess that it would be, because, well, everything else seems to be hovering around that $10,000 upcharge when you start to get into hybrid vehicles. So your $35,000 5.7 car just became $40,000 or $45,000. About the cost of a regular, naturally aspirated, if you want to call the electricity unnatural aspiration. I don't know. This is where terminology gets a little bit screwy for me. But so if your $35,000 5.7 is now $45,000, just because we're playing with numbers here, and 10 grand seems to sound about right. Plus it's kind of a satisfying, it's an intellectually satisfying number considering what we've seen everywhere with these other cars. So $45,000, you go from 370 to 470. Wait a minute. 370, 375 plus the hundo puts you at wait, that's the same as the 6. Wait, let's go look at torque. 400. Well, you get more torque obviously because of 200 foot-pounds of torque, but damn. So let me get this straight. My 5.7 is going to be faster than a regular 6.4, but not probably a ton faster. I'm not really sure. The thing is that how hard can that motor hit, and for how long will you get that boost of power? Well, I don't know, but I can tell you this, that horsepower number seems to be a little bit familiar. And now you're going to be dealing with torque numbers on a 245 size tire that simply will never hook up. Let's look at it from another perspective here. What about if they made all of them? You'd almost have to make them all wide bodies to get them to hook, right? So there's another $6,000. So if it's 10 grand plus 6 grand, because I mean, would you want one that's going to have 245s on it? I don't think you would. See where I'm going with this? This whole thing starts to get real convoluted really quickly. You can see, and it just keeps going down the line. The funny one is actually the 6'4" guy. Because where the 5'7" can now trump a 6'4", 6'4" guy goes from 475 to 575. That's not 707. I'm sorry, yeah, 485. Call it 500. You go to 600. It still ain't 700 horsepower. And you go from 475 torque to 675 torque. You're just barely eclipsing a Hellcat. And I'll be honest with you, Hellcat's a little underrated. So you've now gone from $45,000 to $55,000 to be slower than a basic Hellcat. You gotta be kidding me. So now you're dealing with another tweener with the 6'4", and now the 6'4's roided up version of itself with its E-roids still is gonna get people's elbowed by the freaking Hellcat. So the 6'4" just keeps getting its butt kicked. The regular 6'4" will get roasted by an E-roid 5'7", and it won't be able to hang with a Hellcat. Oh my God, Dodge, you crack me up so much. Anyway, in all seriousness, they would still be massive power increases from where the car's starting out. But again, since we don't have an idea for timeline in terms of how long you'll have this overboost, and then how soon will that regenerate? That's going to depend on battery size. Oh, dang. See, that's the other part of it. We didn't talk about weight. So one of the issues that you're going to have with any of these hybrid systems is obviously it's going to be a heavier system. Now, heavier by how much? Well, there's a lot of factors that are going to play into that, but there's one key factor that you cannot get away from, and that is these types of systems rely obviously on batteries. Battery technology has gotten us pretty far up to this point, but you guys have to understand that the system itself, the motor, and a much larger battery pack than in what anything you would see in a mild hybrid. We're talking at least 100 extra pounds worth of battery, plus whatever extra weight is going to be added to the transmission to add the motor. Let's call that another, I mean, can we at least, again, agree on 100 pounds here? I mean, that seems to sound about right. Motor, big windings, the whole bit. Looks like it would weigh about as much as a supercharger. That's about 80 to 100 pounds. Call it 100 pounds just for the sake of argument. And now you've got an extra 200 pounds at least that you're working with. We haven't even talked about beefier half shafts, beefier drive shafts, and any other ancillary weight that's going to add some percentage to the weight of that system in general. So we're going to ride with a couple of 100 pounds. That means that your 5'7" or 6'4" will go from weighing 4,200 pounds, or say 4,100 pounds, to now 4,300 pounds, or roughly about 100 pounds more than your garden variety base Hellcat. Hellcat then goes from weighing at least 4,400 pounds to 45, 46. I mean, this thing is getting out of control when it comes to weight. And I don't know if you start to think about, wide body and the implications of that. There's so many things that start to look less and less attractive about going full Monty with this hybrid idea. But when you start to break it down and you start to nitpick just the finer points, I'm not so sure that I would be inclined to get on board with the hybrid technology, because to me, hybrid technology is transitional technology. you're not doing anything with the internal combustion engine to make it any better. You're just throwing more parts at the thing. You're throwing more complexity at the thing to at least hope to get more performance out of it, to make some EPA bean counter person happy. Your CAFE, your corporate average fuel economy, that's what that acronym, whatever it is, CAFE stands for, to get those numbers up. Will it help? Well, here's the thing. What I found rather so far in looking into the differences between hybrid and non-hybrid, there is a difference in fuel economy. That difference in fuel economy, provided you are just barely in the throttle and you're really trying to extract as much economy out of that vehicle as you can, you're looking at about a 10 to 12% difference in fuel economy. Is that enough? Well, in this case, no, it's not, because nobody is going to be using that system as a fuel economy enhancement. It just isn't going to happen that way. That extra torque and horsepower is going to be converting tires. They're letting all the smoke out of these tires. And so you are really going to be left in real numbers with something that gets roughly the same fuel economy that is just simply heavier. Yes, it's nice to have the extra torque, and it's basically going to make the car feel like it's got a positive displacement supercharger. But again, it's going to be at the cost of weight and complexity, and it's a hybrid, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. So let's get into some of the things that are going to end up actually being good about that. Hang on just a second. Dad's Garage, thanks, man. Appreciate it. Saying, get those thumbs up. Good evening, all. Good evening, Dad's Garage. Appreciate that, man. Yeah, hit the like, hit the subscribe, guys. Helps me out a ton. So cool things about hybrid technology. Number one, the extra power is pretty cool, provided you can get it to hook up. Two, you will have, I'm sure, some range that you can drive the thing on electrical power. That's great if you need to get to a gas station. At least you've got that option available to you. But the extra power is really the main thing. There's, they can tend to make the vehicle drive more smoothly. So if smoothness is something that you're after, you like that waft of torque that you get when you're taking off, that's really where the hybrid technology comes into play. Primarily heavy partial throttle inputs, high load, low speed, but not wide open throttle, what's known as basically power enriched mode. Or in other words, it's just like driving a Hellcat in essence. Lots of torque, but just, not a lot of horsepower down low because you're not breaking your foot off in it. But again, I have to get back to the traction issues, weight, everything else. They're going to have to find a way to get a little bit of a give and take with this in terms of weight. I would hope, at least, because one of my concerns is the cars get heavier and heavier and heavier. They're a little bit less attractive to me at some point, mainly because, having a car that's clipping somewhere around 4,600 pounds, if you've got a full weight Charger or something like that with the E-roids, I mean, that thing is going to be a beast. It's going to be heavy. So, the money you save in gas might be going to put brake pads on the thing. Your consumable products are going to wear out more quickly. So you've got to take all of these things into account, and you've got to be practical about it too. That's why I'm saying you're going to be in the throttle a lot more because you're going to be playing with all this extra power. So your fuel economy, again, I don't think is going to be any better. The weight is going to take its toll on brakes for sure. But look at other areas on the car. You've got half shafts, drive shafts that are going to be also part of this mix. They ain't cheap, y'all, and those are going to be some components that are going to be stressed as well, especially with all this new torque. And when you think about it, all the torque, again, is available down low. So when you go putting sticky tires on these things and you want to take the thing to the track, throw your DBRs on the thing, do a nice smoky burnout, stab the throttle, and now instead of having, we'll use a 5.7 for example, instead of having 400 pound-feet of torque to play with, you've got 6. Well, that's pretty cool. That works out great. And the 5.7 guy is now just absolutely ripping as a 60-foot. But a 6.4 is going to be a little bit different. You're going to go from, 475 to 675? That's a pretty big jump, but not unsurmountable with modern tires. But you start getting into Hellcat territory, now you're going from 650 to 850. Look, there's plenty of guys that do that every day at the drag strip, but the point is you're going to have to be at the drag strip, you're going to have to be on a tire, and you are absolutely going to have a prepared surface. The street is not going to get it done. And again, I'm left to wonder, is it a certain level of overkill? I don't know. It's tough to say, but it looks great if you've got a 5.7. It looks appetizing if you've got a 6.4, although, there's a big difference between, being appetizing and being a good idea for whatever it is that you're looking at. And of course, for the Hellcats and the red eyes and the everything else downstream, obviously it's a good thing. It's an opportunity to make a lot of power, but nobody's even talking about the Hellcat right now. In fact, the transmission, you've got to have a transmission that can handle basically 1,000 Newton meters or more. Actually, no, it'd be about 1,200 Newton meters worth of torque realistically to work with a Hellcat or a red eye type of a system. So we're talking lots of beefed up components. Just the weight alone is just scary a little bit to me. So that pretty much wraps it up as far as the parallel type system that you would see in the any of the LX platform cars. Now, what about separate motors to run an all-wheel drive system? Well, this is something that's come up a few times, and provided that the transfer case and all the other components will work. I mean, obviously you can engineer something to work. It just, will it fit within an LX platform? I think that type of a hybrid system would be tough. I think you would still see the electric motor in the transmission, but with the right transfer case, it would work great. And again, it could be an option because of all the extra torque that these things would make. I will say this, a Trackhawk with that type of a system would be sick to death. There wouldn't be anything on the street that'd be able to deal with that. So, stoplight to stoplight, that Trackhawk would be owning it. But anyway, I digress. We're primarily focusing on the cars right now, the LX platform. And I don't know, I would love to see them make an all-wheel drive system work. I was really wrong about the Demon back in 2017. I was thinking it would be an all-wheel drive vehicle. Well, history has proven my hopes and dreams completely dashed. But now could be that opportunity. Could you imagine being able to have 800 horsepower and 850 foot-pounds of torque in a regular Hellcat, or 600 and 675 in a 6.4 with an all-wheel drive option? I mean, that thing would come out of the hole like it was chasing somebody that owed it money, and that would be freaking fantastic. But again, the weight of the thing. First of all, where are you going to put the batteries? You have to have batteries scattered all over the place in that thing just to, keep the thing balanced at least somewhat right. But Again, the all-wheel drive adds complexity and a lot of weight. Are we just trying to make a 5,000-pound car over here? I mean, granted, again, the power numbers look amazing, but it's so hard. It's so hard to wrap my head around how much this contraption is going to end up weighing. And will the components be able to deal with the torque and the power of these things once you get them to a drag strip? Because you know that is the exact first place that everybody's going to take one of these things. Throw some sticky tires on it and get that damn thing to the track right now. I can already hear it. So anyway, let me catch up with you guys real quick. Michael Corleone is in. Frederick's in. What is happening? Got the ball guy with the shades and the flex. I like it. Nitro Crew saying, finally got a notification. What's up, dude? What's up, Nitro? Michael's checking in with Demonology. Let's see. Tuxedo's saying, ooh, hybrids. The only hybrids I like are Teslas, Priuses, and brother, those are all electric. Those are not those are not hybrids at all. Brendan's saying, hey, B, couple of things. First thing, I'm sending a PCM out to Diablo to get unlocked for my Hellcat. Do I keep the battery connected while the PCM is out of the car? No, you don't need to do that. That is not a problem. By the way, my wife just text messaged me and she is killing mosquitoes. She has gone all predator on some skeeters at the house. Good to know, baby. Keep getting it. Oh, and Brendan's also saying, also, I've noticed that when my car is cold and I did a cold start, it'll periodically get a puff of black smoke. Is that something to be concerned with? Absolutely not. So yeah, don't worry about the battery being connected or not. And no, it is a rich condition to start the vehicle. So yeah, don't worry about that. Oh, Tux is asking if I can tell him one more time why RPMs drop when you put the vehicle in gear. The reason why is because when you put the vehicle into drive, reverse, whichever gear you're putting it in, you are now putting a load on the engine. And that load will then drop the RPM because it's, you know, if something is spinning and you start to put pressure on it, you'll slow it down. And that's the reason why. Directionally Correct's got the arm flex. I like it. Boosted him. He's saying, I got my Hoosier DBRs. Hopefully I'll be able to test them next week. Yeah, I'd love to get to the drag strip, but it doesn't seem to be happening at least anytime super soon. Couldn't go last night because track is closed because there's an event next weekend. So anytime there's any one of these big events, they shut the track down, you know, for a week to get everything sorted out. That gives them a couple of weeks to get everything all dolled up and right where it needs to be for the event. Well, we've had Spring Nationals, which, you know, they got bumped around, I think, because of COVID or something. Anyway, was able to not go to the track because of that. And now we got this event. So we're basically going to lose some time. But looks like we'll be able to, here throughout the course of the summer, be able to get some track time in. Fingers crossed, hoping that that holds true. Hilton Mode saying, Dodge Thundercat. I like that a lot, man. Oh, Randy saying, good evening, B, checking in from Middle Tennessee. What's up, brother? Gary saying, hope everybody's having a great Memorial Day weekend. Y'all stay safe out there, guys. Gary saying, smack that like button. Yep, give that like button all the love. Hit the bell, too. Don't forget to do that. The weird thing is, for some of this YouTube channel has been around for a while, and I never did change it up. But the funny thing about it is that when I first started the YouTube channel, all you had to do was subscribe, and you would get notifications whenever that particular channel that you subscribed to went live or just, you know, posted up something new. So for example, whenever Demonology would post up something, it would pop up Demonology. And I go, oh, cool, boop, and then, you know, play it. So it's not really like that now. You have to hit that notification bell. And I had a lot of subscribers that subscribed early on that, there was no notification bell. Well, the funny thing is if you don't go back and hit that notification bell, there's a real good chance you're not going to get notifications. So definitely hit that bell. Let's see. Yeah, Dad's Garage saying, get those thumbs up. Scat Pack saying, what up, man? What's up, man? Got the arm flex. LM saying, recently got 5.7 to 600 wheel horsepower with 6,400 RPM shift point. Yep. It'll take at least that. Have a NAG 1, 3,200 stall, 373. What is a normal drop in RPM when you shift up in a gear when drag racing? 100 to 1,500 RPM? Is there a way to calculate with future mods? It stays the same. Whatever the split is in the gear ratios, that's what it's going to drop. So it's going to depend on the converter too, whether you're locking or unlocking the converter. If you've got a real loose converter, you're not going to see much of a drop. It may only drop 500. But for typical street cars, I want to say that it drops about 1,500 RPM. So you can take your final drive ratio and multiply out all of well, actually, all you need are your transmission ratios, but your final drive will help a little bit to sort this out a little bit for you too. But take your transmission ratios and whatever the difference is from first to second, that percentage increase, that's what your decrease is going to be in RPM. So, but that's about what you're going to see. Scatback saying our Mopars would be a beast at the track if they weighed the same as a Camaro or Mustang. Yeah, they would. Slash saying, if I remember right, you said the best street tires for the Hellcat rims are the ET Street SS. Yeah, I love me some ET Street SSs. For the stock Hellcat wheel, if you want something that's going to stick on the street, at least better than a stock tire, something that's going to be a little bit safer. If you're hitting that thing at like 40 or 60 miles an hour, that would be the tire that you'd want to go with. They're not going to do you any favors in the wet, so don't even drive that car when it's raining. But for dry weather and just, fun cruising around, spirited performance, they do a really good job. Oh, Randy's saying, with the new merger, what platform would the new Challenger Charger go to? What kind of weight savings? It wouldn't change platforms. In fact, FCA right before Stellantis, and I think Stellantis may have had a hand in this, they re-upped the licensing agreement with Mercedes-Benz for the LX platform. They re-upped that through 2023. Now, I think there's an option for 2025 in there as well, but there wouldn't be a change. There would just be a change to the current LX platform. There's really not a good existing platform to move over to. So best bet is to take a look at the LX platform, see where there's some opportunity for weight loss, if there is any, and use a kind of a little bit more forward thinking approach to engineering when it comes to that platform. In other words, think of the platform, think of how you can make it a little bit lighter maybe, but then also the big kick is going to be how to get it to be able to comply with the demand of a hybrid power system. So, HU saying it would take a redesign of the platform to make a hybrid work. Of course it would. If a small car were made a hybrid, turbo 4, small engine, 430 horse, 550 torque, in a car weighing less than 4,000 pounds, torque management can reduce strain on the drivetrain of a hybrid limited braking. So here's the thing. The idea of, and you kind of bring up a good point here, because we're not going to get there for where we're at now. Dodge is still going to be a muscle car company. The idea of taking like a Giulia platform and having just a real pissed off 4-cylinder with a turbo and have that basically there to supplement a very powerful electric drivetrain with a lot of battery capacity, That is just not what Dodge is going to do, even though it would probably realistically be a better setup. Which kind of transitions us into a different way to talk about this. We're coming into the conversation, at least I am, and I'm delivering this conversation to you from the point of view of Dodge as it stands today, Dodge as it follows its marketing today, which is to say, lots of tire smoke, lots of rock and roll music, America, the whole bit. That's primarily what they're doing here. To say that it would be better to have a Turbo 4 with the electric, with all of that, don't worry about getting under 4,000 pounds, because with all of that stuff in the car, it is not going to get there. But let's say it's exactly 4,000 pounds. Fantastic. Now you're going right up against the Mustang, which is far more Mustang, and I mean the internal combustion Mustang here. A Mustang which is far more Mustang than anything that Dodge is ever going to make. Camaro has tried and tried and tried again, and they just keep failing to be more Mustang than Mustang. So that's probably not the best idea from a corporate image point of view. The idea from a corporate image point of view is to still have this big, nasty engine that just now has its new partner in crime, this electric motor on board, that's going to help it get even more nasty on the street. Burnouts, instead of being 3 city blocks, are now going to be an entire mile long, I guess. I don't know. The idea behind it, though, is that they have to stay within that corporate image, or they fail being able to be Mopar as we know it today. A big reason why Dodge does so well is because it appeals to a very broad demographic of folks. You've got Ford guys that love Mopar because they're big. They're just the biggest contraption you can get with a big V8. You've got import guys that still like this type of car because it's very Americana. It's big, bold, brash, in your face, the whole bit. It's basically like a thick chick with a big ass and nice tits, pretty eyes, thick lips that can chug beers. That is Mopar in a nutshell. It's not the hot librarian, which is the Mustang, or the stripper of questionable everything that is the Camaro. It is exactly what it is, and it is for that reason that everybody loves that car, or it loves that platform, I should say. You cannot, therefore, try to make it something that it's not. No matter how good it is, it could be better by a magnitude of 10, and it still wouldn't matter because it's not Mopar enough anymore. Guys, there's a reason why the Viper didn't ever do as well as it should have. The corporate vision was just never there to understand that you have to have a car that does automobile things as well as be a badass. That's what Corvette does. Viper really never got there. Now we're talking about Hellcats, 5.7s, 6.4s, to try to talk about a platform with any other engine would be anti-Mopar, and I think that would just hurt the branding of it too much. Unless you got a little bit crafty and really brought back some nasty names. Daytona, GLH, these are a couple that would work really well. Look back into your old DSM days, Starion or something like that. Bring back one of the more iconic. Stealth would be another one. Bring back some of the iconic DSM badges. Do something a little bit different with the ES platform. Call it, the new 600 turbo hybrid or whatever you want to call it. But that would be the only way you'd be able to make it work. It would be at least palatable for some of the more obscure Mopar fans like me that actually know what these cars are. But for the general public, it would just be this car that goes completely against all of the marketing that we have been fed up to this point. The corporate image would take a complete makeover at that point, which is probably not in the best interest. Mr. Ed is saying, thoughts on mid-tube headers? I've got mid-tube asymmetrical headers on Sierra. They're fine. You know, a lot of times you're going to go mid-tubes based on packaging. That's usually how that works. I like mid-tubes. I like mid-tubes primarily because they're easier, they're a better fit in many cases. You're not going to lose a lot of power with mid-length headers versus a long tube. You got to remember that long tubes vary a lot by platform, by car, basically. There's stuff that the tubes have to go around, up into, all this other stuff. It's not always the case. I know you'll see things, well, on the dyno, on an engine dyno, we found that, chill out, okay? Engine dynos don't really translate to the street as well as you would hope that they do. If mid-length headers work for your application and that's what's going to fit into the vehicle that you're working on, and that's what will make life easier for you at some point because of disassembly, reassembly, but just go with it. It's cool, man. You'll be just fine. Make plenty of power. Simon saying, "What's up, B? What's up, man?" Tux is saying he's got his birthday week coming up and he gets to watch a live show. Thanks, man. Light Grid saying, what is my favorite Gatorade flavor? His is red and blue. I go with the green and the light blue typically. And normally I would have those with me, but I don't tonight. Let's see. Gary's saying, love the analogy. Light's loving it too. Gaxy's saying, good to be here live for the first time. Very cool. Happy to have you. Tux is asking, do I know why VW quit making Beetles? They just have a production run and then that basically ends at some point. And, you know, they don't feel like that platform is viable anymore. It's typically why all manufacturers quit making those types of cars. So, all right, so getting back to the hybrids, well, sticking with the hybrid theme, I should say. There are a lot of different ways to get from point A to point B with this hybrid thing. Big engines with big hybrid systems. They make big power, but they weigh a ton, and their range is going to be limited. And you know what, guys? We haven't even talked about one other thing about this. How much reserve power are you going to have with this hybrid setup? Think of it like this. You know, we're talking about all these really big, really impressive power numbers, but, you know, the reality is that those numbers aren't there all the time. Those batteries are going to be depleted. There's going to be a recharge refractionary amount of time before you can actually tip into that amount of power again. So let's say that because of reasons, battery capacity, let's say, you've only realistically got maybe 3 or 4 hits before you're going to be down for, well, let's say it's less than that. Let's say it's 3 hits and then it's going to take another, I don't know, 10 minutes of driving, 20 minutes of driving, whatever the number is, to charge the batteries back up so that you can again get that acceleration out of that vehicle. Is that a bad thing? Well, not necessarily. I mean, you figure you're still going to have, you know, cool down time. If you're at the drag strip, you could, you know, let the thing, you know, idle for a little bit, charge up the batteries or do whatever you need to do. Not really worried about that, but, you know, it's just one more piece of the puzzle that you have to take into account. It's only needed to be taken into account, though, if it is a practical reality. You know, if the thing charges up within 5 minutes, then it's not really a practical reality. You can get out there and wail on the thing pretty regularly. And as long as you get the thing just enough normal time to cool down, get out there and hit it again. But if there is an extended amount of time that the vehicle needs to sit, charge, idle, or whatever in between passes at the drag strip or whatever it is that you're doing with the thing, that's got to be something that you're going to have to manage. And again, my thought on hybrids, no matter how you set it up, it's unless it is in series, like what we talked about earlier on, where you have an engine and its only reason for existence is to turn a generator, and it has nothing to do with powering the wheels, then it's going to be a transitional technology. And to me, transitional technology translates into not as good as what is to come, or not as good as what it could have been. It's in that liminal space between where you are now transferring into where you're going to be. And unfortunately, this is that spot where it's just not going to be as good as what a true hybrid in series would be. Now, in a fantasy world, you guys know where I'm at with this. I would much rather see an all electric, if you will, version that would utilize somewhere, that would, get you somewhere in the neighborhood of, 650 or 700 horsepower and 900 pound-feet of torque of electric power. But it would also have like a small gas turbine that would be able to turn a generator to just keep the batteries charged up, and to keep up with some of the demand of, the things sitting in a parking lot. The thing can automatically kick on, charge up the batteries, or do whatever, so you wouldn't have to worry about charging stations. Range anxiety, things like that would pretty much go out the window. And again, a gas turbine that would run on literally anything that's flammable would be about, the size of a briefcase or a little bit bigger than that. So, very little in terms of weight. Fueling, you could have a 5-gallon capacity tank and it would last for a long ass time. So, again, just some things to consider as far as where you would really want to get to. But again, as you're coming into the conversation of hybrid, of course, you would want the smallest gasoline engine that would power a generator, primarily, but also have some forward thrust capability for and through the transmission. In other words, it would just basically be facilitating the electric motors in general and augmenting the electric motors at that point. So you could almost think of it as a mild hybrid, but in reverse. It would still be a parallel system, but again, that gas engine is really only there if you run out of capacity for your batteries. Then your gasoline engine can get you somewhere, and it can also run and charge the batteries. Again, that is the other side of that. We're talking about the e-torque earlier, with it being a very mild version of a hybrid. You can kind of still call it a hybrid, but it really ain't a hybrid. That would be the opposite. That would be the yin to that protocol and that system's yang. Would probably be more efficient, but again, you start to get into at what point do you start talking about, where does the lithium come from, the batteries, and the actual, the actual cost to the environment? I don't even want to get into that, because that just gets really weird. The conversation starts flopping around like a fish out of water. So anyway, let me check in with you guys real quick. Let's see. Oh, Jay saying, just ordered an 88 millimeter Fastman throttle body for his 19 Scat Pack. Do you think a bigger throttle body is worth it? And should I be okay without a tune? I also have a Hellcat airbox Cannon filter. Yeah, you'd get a lot more. I would say I should say, get a lot more out of that if you have that manifold port matched to that throttle body, but 88 is really big. But I think you'll be fine with that. I don't think you're going to run into too many issues. Again, I would always default for the smaller throttle body, mainly because matching that and then blending everything through the throat the way that you need to is going to be better than just putting that much larger throttle body on there. A lot of it has to do with the fact that the opening of that throat is really only like 80 millimeters realistically, but it necks down as it kind of drops down and comes around. So without porting that manifold, that throttle body that you got may not do you a whole lot of good. Your mom is calling me. That's funny. Hellcats rule. Yeah, they kind of do. I mean, Hellcats really did open up a lot of people's eyes to what you could do as a swan song for the internal combustion engine. So, I tell you what, since we're talking about hybrids so much, why are we talking about hybrids? Why aren't we talking about, redeveloping or rethinking the internal combustion engine? Well, there's several reasons for that. One, we've basically hit the limit as far as what 91 octane gasoline will actually be able to manage. And I say 91, I'm well aware that 93 octane is out there, and obviously E85 is out there too. And if you're watching this channel, then chances are better than average that you know what the benefits of that E85 are. But you also know the risks that are involved. Look, 91, 93 octane, whatever best octane you can get your hands on from a normal pump, it can only manage so much cylinder pressure. There's only so much anti-knock that it can manage. And guys, you got to look at it like this. It wasn't that long ago that if you were making 700 horsepower, talking about the Hellcat here, if you're making 700 horsepower, you were running race gas. In fact, you weren't even thinking about running pump gas into that engine. It wasn't much long before that point in time that if you were making more than 500 horsepower, 550 horse for sure, you were running race gas. It was a limit, like a breakover point, man, 500 horsepower. You might want to start thinking about running some type of a race gas in that thing, because that's what it would take to be able to manage the power of those engines back then. Well, the reality is that we have gotten to a point now where, and I know this just from my experience with tuning, where based on the weight of the vehicle and based on the knock sensors and the knock sensor voltage and what I can get away with realistically with timing and all these other things with these cars, at this weight and at that load and at this aerodynamic, which I use the term generously, drag coefficient, there's very little that 91 or 93 octane can keep managing at this point. You're making 700 plus horsepower with pump gas. You are trusting 700 horsepower to pump gas that do you honestly believe that that is the top tier best possible fuel that you could run in that thing? I got news for you, it ain't. So just know that coming into it. But they're still able to get that kind of power out of the swill that comes out of those pumps, and it's at least marginally consistent. So at least you have that to fall back on. But what used to be, and by the way, let me do kind of a comparison for you. Redline tune versus Hellcat tune. There is such a big difference between a Redline tune and a Hellcat tune to be able to manage not only the extra boost, but the extra heat and everything else that comes from that larger supercharger, that if you were to put the timing values of a Hellcat into even really at the same boost levels, there's not that much of a gain. Even though the Hellcat is significantly more aggressive than the Red-Eye, there's just not that much of a gain because the knock sensors start having a field day at that point. Now, granted, there are some efficiencies that you can play with. Pull that IHI supercharger off, turbocharging. Yes, there are parasitic losses that you can take advantage of, and at the same boost level, yeah, I'd probably pick up 50, 80, 100 horsepower. It doesn't matter because it's the actual power, the cylinder pressure that those engines are making that is now becoming to be capped out. And there are folks that were even trying to say, look, to really get better efficiency, and this is very true, the higher the compression, the higher the efficiency of the engine. So if you could take that engine, let's say a 4-cylinder, because we were talking about that earlier, and I think Mazda was trying to do this at one point, throw 13-to-1 compression at it, throw a turbo on it, and work with timing to try to keep the thing from popping on whatever fuel you're running in it. But if you could have 100 octane unleaded, then you would have a situation where you could lean run that vehicle, and on top of that, have it run partially under boost, perfect cylinder filling, and get fantastic fuel economy. Well, that's what it would take. It would take a significant change in the type of fuel that you would have to be able to get the type of power and the fuel economy out of these engines without resorting to the hybrid technology that we're talking about. So anyway, that's basically it in a nutshell. I'll check back in with you guys real quick. Tuxedo's checking in, loving him some Hellcat stuff. Cody's asking, would a tune help elevate knocks? It could if you're running very high timing. Tux is asking, is it bad to redline your engine? It depends on the engine, and it depends on what the redline is. Normally, no. That's part of that's really part of the engineering parameters of that engine, is just to say, don't rev it past this number and then you're going to hit a rev limiter. It's never good to bounce an engine off a rev limiter, but it's typically not bad. Now, that being said, depends on the engine. Sierra over here, 400 small block, normal like high performance limit of that block, I would say probably somewhere around 6,000 RPM, maybe 6,250, 65 at the very most, just because of, reasons. That thing only if it revs to 4,500 RPM, 5,000 RPM, if you put a red line at 5,000 RPM, it basically just means you don't need to spin it any faster than this. You're on the way down. You're not making any more power at this point. In fact, you're losing power. So no, typically no. Now, if you had a GT350, that'd be a little bit different story because you're talking about such a high RPM. It's designed to run at that RPM, but there's oiling things at that point. Once you really start getting to the high RPM, high performance engines, you're going to start to run up against the limits of what an oil pump can handle, the limits of what a water pump can handle, and how they move fluids without what's known as cavitating. Cavitating just means that you develop air pockets and you physically aren't pumping that fluid anymore. So, but for the most part, nah, I wouldn't say do it all the time, but it's not going to hurt it. Jay's saying, sorry, section 84 millimeter throttle body. With a 4 millimeter shaft. That is correct. Yes. Gary's asking 454 in the GMC. No, it is a 400 small block. It runs like it's got a big block in it, but no, it's a small block. 400 cubic inch. Cody's saying, imagine Dodge bringing back the SRT4 and boosting the Dodge Journey. I would say that would be pretty awesome. Cody's saying, I feel like Ford blew up a lot of engines before they finally put together the 5.0. So I'll tell you this, they blew up a lot of 5.2s trying to get the Voodoo engine sorted out. In fact, it's kind of funny. Ford, they have had so many weird issues with that engine because flat plane cranks are just, they just vibrate their asses off. The second, you got primary and secondary vibrations, and it's the secondary vibrations in a 4-cylinder that make it buzzy and make it vibrate. Well, a flat plane V8 is 2 4-cylinders basically just sharing the same lobe, but it's the way that it fires, bang, 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 bang. It's like having 2 4-cylinders attached to each other. And so because of that, it get weird harmonics out of that. Can potentially, I should say, get some weird harmonics out of that. So that's why when folks were talking about, hey, the new Vet's got a 5.5 liter flat plane crank, and it's like, is it going to balance shaft that thing? How is that really going to work? I'm a little bit concerned here. So anyway, who knows? Maybe it'll be a hybrid. But the main thing I wanted to talk to you guys about is kind of walk y'all through the different types of hybrids that are out there. Give y'all a little bit better idea as far as how they work. And again, to recap, a hybrid in series is just if think of a locomotive, it's an engine that's there to turn a generator that powers electric motors and charges batteries, but the internal combustion engine does not have anything to do with the actual drive of the tires. Everything else is basically in parallel. You've got mild hybrids like the e-torque that is the absolute lowest, your entry level way to have a hybrid, but it's really not a hybrid in the way that you would think because you cannot power the vehicle from the electric motor alone. And then from there, you have the rest of the parallel hybrids, which would be an engine with an electric motor in the transmission. It could be an engine that is got a normal drivetrain out the back that is also powering and charging for electric motors up front. All of those would still be in parallel. I wouldn't ever consider, that's kind of a pretty high-end type of a setup. Although it's amazing because you literally have separate computers working in tandem with each other at that point. They're direct drive gear. You literally can vector torque with them. It's all kinds of crazy when you start getting into some of that stuff. But again, they range. There's such a wide range. The main thing to remember is this: it will only add power, but is the added complexity and weight and everything else that comes with it worth it? I don't know. What about the cost? We haven't heard anything yet about a cost. And because we haven't heard anything about cost, we can't really judge worth. Let me ask you guys this. If somebody were to say, we're going to hybridize 6.4s, and that cost is going to be $0. If you want a 6.4, you can get it either with the 6.4 as it sits, or you can get the hybrid. Which one would you choose? And then at what price would you no longer choose the hybrid if you started out saying, absolutely, I would get the hybrid? You'd be a fool not to. 100 horsepower, 200 pound-feet of torque. Yes, I will take that. Thank you very much. Well, at what price would you no longer take that? And that developing that value proposition is really the toughest portion of the conversation when you think about it. Because look, if I tell you it's free, then you take it every time. But if I told you that it would cost you an extra $20,000, you'd say absolutely not. I mean, for that amount of money, I can get a Hellcat. That's exactly my point. Is $10,000 enough? Can you make money on 10 grand? I don't know. I guess my thing is this. We haven't heard anything from Mopar in forever. We have yet to hear anything about a new platform. We've never heard anything else come from, is there going to be something new in terms of an interior update or an engine update? Can I at least get short runner valves for the Challenger and for the Durango? Why the hell is it that you can have a truck that makes 395 horse and a car that makes 375 horse, and it's the same freaking engine, just an intake manifold is different? Can you at least give my 5.7 guys a little bit of love? Give the 6.4 an update. Do something with it. Nothing has been coming from Mopar in that respect. And this is the latest thing that we have to chat about. This is the only thing that we have to discuss that carries any real weight. Is this enough? Is this enough to keep people engaged in talking about Dodge, Mopar, anything like that? It's tough to say, because what ends up happening is we're not talking about Dodge the way that it is now. We're talking about Dodge in an eco-friendly way. And it almost seems a little bit less than appetizing to start talking about Dodges with hybrid technology. And I know a lot of guys shy away from it. They don't want to hear about it. They don't even consider the weight or the financial cost. They just don't want electric motors powering their vehicles. Hey, it's a free country. That's how you feel it. I mean, don't obviously look at how it works and understand that this is a new technology and it works great, but I'm right there with you. It feels kind of creepy, not to mention the fact I still feel like it's transitional technology. It's not as good as it could be, because as good as it could be would be all electric or a hybrid in series. But again, it's the weight, it's everything else that's already working against you. I just don't know how well it will end up playing. And again, talking about a more practical point of view, with all this extra torque, 200 foot-pounds of torque, 100 horsepower, how are you going to get 245 series tires to hook? You think 275s are even going to work? I don't think so. So it should be pretty interesting as things develop to see really what they're going to end up coming together with this thing. I think that it'll be exciting. I think it'll be cool, but I've got to see some kind of marketing coming from Dodge relatively soon. We keep hearing that the V8 is going to die, the Hellcat's days are numbered, and all of this other nonsense, seemingly, I should say nonsense, because we're not being sold anything at this point. We keep hearing about these interviews that take place and the doom and gloom comes, but then it's, oh, well, here's a Hellcat Durango for you. Here's the TRX that we've put together. How about a super stock? Would you like one of those? Basically, any opportunity that they've had to Hellcat a platform, they've done it. But have they done it the right way? Why, instead of doing that, why wouldn't Dodge first on this hybrid technology? Because I'm here to tell you that would have gone a long way in dropping the economies of scale, making it significantly more affordable, and working out all the kinks that much earlier. The technology exists right now within HP, or rather within ZF, for their transmissions to make this work the way that it sits. So I don't know. Would you guys rather see another Hellcat version of a thing, or would you rather see something along the lines of a hybrid? And I've been talking about hybrids this whole time as though they're a bad thing. Look, there's a lot of folks out there that like hybrids and that are looking into ways to hot rod hybrids. Better speed controllers for the electric motor, better ramping for the electric motor in terms of how that motor comes on when you give it full throttle, adding battery capacity to that thing. There's a lot of ways you can make electricity work really well in your favor, but a lot of guys just don't like it. I mean, look, when you're working on a car, it's pretty easy to figure out what a grease nipple is, but you get somebody trying to figure out how to rewire something or even mess with wiring to begin with, people run for the hills. So, I imagine the whole car is nothing but electric motors and wires, and it's complete and total meltdown. You're not going to be able to work on your car anymore. It's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm working on this thing quite a bit. Anyway, y'all get the idea. Y'all know where I'm coming from with all of that. Sovereign saying, smash that like button. Absolutely. Tuxedo saying, he's saying his dad has a Hyundai, saying it's not a good idea to redline it. I mean, you don't want to go around just bouncing the thing off the red line. The idea is that you don't want to run it past that, because anything past the red line, you can potentially run into problems. I hate you saying the problem with Ford engines is that they make power above the red line and people over rev them. The engine blows because oil pumps, for example, can't meet the demands of lubrication. One of the things is that you can tune them to where they will absolutely make power past that red line. So yeah, you're definitely onto that. Plus those oil pump gears can break. Cody's talking about the 1.5 and 2.0 and 2.3. Mr. Blacktop saying, hey B, great chat as always. Right now Jeep has the 4xe, half gas and half electric, putting out 375 horse. I would be really intrigued with what kind of hybrid they can come up with, a V8. Yeah, and that's the thing. The way that it's kind of set up is that it would go engine, flex plate, I guess, or, coupling to electric motor coupled to the actual transmission itself. Obviously, there'd be a torque converter involved there too. But again, there's added complexity, added weight to the system, and you've got added rotating weight, which doesn't help the situation much at all if you're not under electric boost, if you will. That's a lot of extra weight hanging off the back of that engine. Jalen's asking, do you think there'll be any engine packages like NA426, since the redesign looks unlikely for the Charger and Challenger until at least 23? Brother, I would not hold my breath, man. I can tell you this: you would sooner see a hybrid than you would a 426, because the hybrid technology exists now, number one, and number two, probably more to the point, you don't have to have an electric motor emissions tested and run through the EPA the way that you do through the development of your good old-fashioned internal combustion engine. I have a feeling if they were going to do it, they would have already done it. And to be honest with you, you'd have seen it basically being fantailed with the release of the Hellcat crate motor, I would at least think, because what better opportunity to actually put something in a car that you can drive than to run that type of a platform out there, that 426, in other words, platform out there in a special release Challenger, new 1320, or call it the Vanishing Point, or call it whatever you want, even though that was a 440. But you kind of get the idea. It's a losing proposition at this stage of the game for Dodge to actually come out with a 426, because the cost of development is going to be excruciating to deal with. It's going to be very painful to get that run through the system. The other thing that you got to consider is, again, with hybrid technology, you're going to make way more power with that hybrid than you're ever going to make with a stroker setup for your 392. And that hybrid technology can be waterfall literally all over the map. You can put that in 5.7s, 3.6s. I mean, all the way up and down the map, you can do that. So, with each progressive step up, it may represent less and less of a gain in terms of percentage and power. But, look, man, 100 horsepower is 100 horsepower. And you're not going to go from 485 to 585, going from 392 cubic inches to 426 cubic inches. Just not going to work. What the hell got it in my face? Ugh. Every time. All right, let's see. Cody's asking, would longer shift points benefit a car with short gearing? Well, sorta. So if you're talking about short gearing, meaning like 456s or something like that, then you are doing that primarily with the understanding that you have an engine that can rev to take advantage of that gearing. If you don't, then it's not going to help you too much. Cody's saying, knowing Dodge, they're going to put it in the Trackhawk Durango. It'd be easier to put it in the Trackhawk Durango first because it's just easier to package in that platform. Gary's saying, I just feel so blessed to have my 2020 Challenger Scat Pack manual, enjoying driving it every day. Whatever Dodge does in the future is just a bonus. And that's really a good way to look at it. And I think we can kind of wrap it up from here on that statement. Whatever Dodge does, Dodge is going to do in a Dodge way. And I know that with everybody being more concerned about, fuel economy and CAFE standards and all this other stuff, yeah, we need to have improvements with that, I guess. But to stick with the corporate image and to be able to deliver vehicles that their buying public wants to put into their garage, Dodge is not going to be able to put together something like a 4-cylinder. I think you're still going to see, and what has been discussed is just still the V8 platform with that hybrid technology. Now, when are we going to get it? Don't know. What are the final costs going to be? Don't know. How much will it affect drivability? What kind of performance will we get out of this thing? Don't know. But what we do know is that more is typically the way that Dodge handles things. If somebody tells them that they can get 100 horsepower and 200 pound-feet of torque out of a hybrid system, Dodge will try to figure out a way to come up with 150 and 250. It's just what Dodge is known for. Best way to look at it is they're going to do what they can to keep the muscle car alive for as long as possible and try to stay out of the wheelhouse of Mustang for as long as possible. So in saying that, the muscle car will live on. It'll be a little bit different. It might be a different idea as far as what a muscle car is, but times change. And usually, most of the time, the brand improves, the breed improves as time goes on. You get better at what you do. You keep making stuff that is succeeding the previous generations. That's the way Dodge is going to do this, and that's what I think is really going to happen with this. I'm excited about it, but again, time will tell if that excitement turns into disappointment or if I get even more elated with what Dodge is going to bring to the table. But with that, guys, we're coming up on about an hour and a half. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up at this point. With that, love each and every one of you guys. I absolutely could not do this without y'all. Be safe out there. If you're going to send it, don't bend it. Keep your shiny side up. And we will catch y'all on the next one. And that is a wrap. Adios.